Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journey and how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. I'm your host, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage family therapist. Thanks for tuning in again this week. A little bit different this week. It's just me solo doing a solo episode. Um, we are talking topically about Men's Mental Health Month, which is November. As a male, this is a topic that I think hits close to home, and also I think we don't have a lot of nuanced takes on. I think a lot of people are aware of what's up with men's mental health, and I think a lot of people are not doing much about it. We're having the wrong conversation, which, for those of you in the know, I don't think will be shocking at all. And maybe we can all learn something today. And I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers. I think I hope to sort of lay out what's going on, why it is the way that it is, and offer some potential avenues to make progress. Not that they're easy or simple fixes on a societal level. So, what's up with men's mental health? I mean, it's struggling. To say there is an epidemic of mental health is not an understatement. That is true for every demographic. No one's thriving right now. Current political landscape globally, not just in America, there's been a shift. Pretty much every major first world country incumbent who has run recently has lost, which shows a general level of dissatisfaction. Deaths of despair are up, especially among men. Men contribute for a majority of the suicides in the United States. So, yeah, it's pretty dire. And again, this isn't new. Obviously, since COVID, things were really heightened. But even before COVID, there was this trend of mental health issues, a lot of across the board, certainly for young people, and then also for men. So what's going on? I mean, how do we navigate that men are having a hard time when marginalized communities are having a hard time, and especially white men are very privileged in our American society? How can both those things be true? And so let's start by sort of understanding that, like, to be a male in modern society in America, in most first world countries, taking a second to pause here, in all first world countries, is a privileged status. It is easier to be a man than it is to be a different member of a marginalized community. And so I think that makes talking about men's mental health issues really hard. And I think it is this weird lack of nuance around this conversation. Privilege can exist, but we have to look at intersectionality. There are different aspects to someone's privilege. Someone who grows up white and male is more privileged than someone who grows up black or brown and male. Someone who is born male and is wealthy is privileged in a way that someone who's born to a lower socioeconomic status is not. And so we have all these things that sort of interplay here, where I would say majority of people, because of late stage capitalism, are not in that privileged socioeconomic status. Most of us are not born with a trust fund into our name and set for life. Most of us have to work. Most of us have this idea of like social climbing, and that requires work. And that includes, working class people, but also includes people like doctors, lawyers, nurses. Like, I know so many folks who are in those areas, therapists too, we're not wealthy, who are working stiffs. And we look at the class divide and we think that's where the divide is, from somebody who makes like $50,000 or less a year to somebody who's making, $200,000 a year. But those people who are making $200,000 a year are still working. There's a whole class above us. I'm not in that upper 200,000 at all. There's a class above that does not have to work, that has all their basic necessities met for life without having to work for that. And so late stage capitalism, that keeps getting worse. The wealth inequality keeps getting worse. And so while there is privilege to being male, there's also all these other intersectional aspects of identity that are not privileged. And so that opens up some nuance and creates the space where, like, hey, yeah, men, especially white men, are privileged in America, and they're also suffering because most people are going to suffer under late stage capitalism. That's the game, right? It's hoarding wealth for very few people until, I don't know, French Revolution style stuff starts happening. I'm trying to have an upbeat conversation around this topic while also, again, like seeing late stage capitalism advance, right? Like things are going to continue to get worse. There's not a way for a peaceful revolution, most likely. And this isn't me advocating for violence. This is me acknowledging that, like, it's already not peaceful, right? Like people are suffering, people are dying. That's why the suicide rate is so high. That's why these deaths of despair for overdoses and suicides are so high. People are already suffering. That's violence. Police killing innocent people is violence. It's an authoritarian state already. So like the idea that I can say like, yeah, things are going to get worse. They will. That's what history tells us about late stage capitalism. That's the inevitable result. And that's not saying like advocating for violence. It's already violent. The United States has some specific issues that make men's mental health worse. Um, so I'm going to try and highlight the nuance there and talk about when I'm just talking about the U.S. versus when I'm talking about something else. The first big thing with men's mental health in the United States, I would say in other first world countries, although we'll get into why this varies from country to country, is cultural norms. Masculinity as a concept is untenable. It's unhealthy. The gender is a social construct, and the way that we continue to construct these gender roles, norms, ideas is all bullshit. It's not based on anything. I say this as a dude who's got a full beard, a full head of hair, nice big mustache. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. I played 205, 210. I don't know. I don't weigh myself. Played sports at a D1 college, graduated from college in 3 years, have 2 graduate level degrees. Like by any metric of society standards, I, as a male, have been a success. I guess because I've never hit that socioeconomic status. Maybe that's the one that I'm missing. But I own a house. You know, I've done the things. I've got kids, reproduced. Look at me, go team. I did very little in that process. So by any standard in America, I check a lot of boxes for masculinity, and I'm also saying like those are all bullshit, and the people who are pushing those are performative in nature. So one of the big issues with masculinity, why men's mental health is suffering, because the people who are trying to sell masculinity as a concept are not interested in health and are not interested in wellness. They are grifters, right? Joe Rogan, 5'6", balding, HGH, ribcage, whatever that weird thing is, idiot, intellectually stunted, is overcompensating across the board. And why? So he can sell his supplements to people, right? Like I have this podcast that is free. Listen to it. I have a YouTube channel that's free. It does cost money to see me in therapy because that's work, right? Like that's my job. That's how I pay the bills. I didn't sign up for late stage capitalism. I was born into it. And also, like it's not a grift that I'm running. It is a services that I'm offering people that have good results, like we know that therapy works and we know that therapy works for people who can connect with it. So I'm not selling myself to everyone. I'm selling myself to people who want to work with me. There's a give and take there. The masculinity grifters are selling products, are selling not goods and not services. They're selling goods. They're selling supplements for your workout. They're selling hair loss treatments, even though they're bald. They're selling, whatever thing it is that will make you more masculine, bigger muscles, thicker head of hair, faster car, like I don't know how any of that has to do with gender. Gender's made up. And so everything that goes along with it is made up too. And that's why it's so easy to grift. We have this idea that it is manly to like not talk about emotions. We have this idea that it's masculine to not have emotions. And the ones that are socially acceptable for masculinity are anger and rage, right? Like they're not healthy things. This is what we see through societal norms. We see on TV, we see in movies, we see in pop culture. It's all these things around this very narrow range of emotions because emotions have somehow been deemed to be feminine. But when you look back at history, this idea of masculinity and the grift around it has always been there. It's been that men are too fat. It's been that men are too skinny. It's been that Men are not doing enough in the home. It's been that men are doing too much in the home, right? Like there have been all these moral panics and all this outrage around masculinity throughout history on like in totally opposite direction. It's like, oh no, the women are making our boys too feminine. Men should spend more time in the home. And then it's like, oh no, men are spending too much time in the home. Why aren't they making more money? Right? Like it's all this bullshit nonsense about capitalism saying to be successful, you need to look like this. And part of that is maybe a car in the garage or owning a home in the first place or having, producing. Success is based on these external things that can only be gotten by participating in capitalism. And so we have this idea of masculinity that is untenable, is unsustainable. Again, the grifters. Look at your other right-wing weirdo grifters, Tim Pool, who won't take his beanie off because he's balding and is embarrassed about his masculinity, who cannot grow a full beard. Matt Walsh at least can grow a full beard. And again, like I'm being shitty here because these people are shitty, not because I believe those things mean masculinity. They don't. But Matt Walsh has that nice full beard that is dyed blacker than black because I'm assuming he's got gray hair, and for some reason that's scary that like we age ? That time exists and it affects our body is somehow an assault on masculinity. Like this is a preposterous concept. Ben Shapiro too, like those big bushy black brows that he dyes black. Like what is going on? The grift of Vince McMahon, who wears makeup and has done steroids for his whole life and sexually assaults women. Donald Trump, who wears really bad spray tans and orange makeup and sexually assaults women. RFK, who's done steroids and has brain worms. Like there is no super masculine dude. And then under this are all these like quote unquote effeminate dudes. Like Tucker Carlson is not a guy's guy. He's not a dude's dude, but he's going to sell this because he has money and is a good grift. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson is like not a masculine dude, but he's going to sell this men are the head of the household things because he's not checking those other boxes. And again, like all these grifters online, right? The Liver King, who said he was natty for years, even though he's obviously been doing steroids. All these like ex-military SEAL Team 6 bros who are selling you coffee to make you more manly, who have beards that they couldn't grow while they're in the military, but now like look at how manly they are. A lot of this stuff is like not up to you. You know what is up to you? Like being a good communicator to your partner, not yelling at your kids, going to therapy and doing your own work. Like if you're tall or not isn't up to you. If you can grow good facial hair or not up to you. So again, all these things are things that are not done through hard work and effort. They're things that are easy to manipulate. And when the population fits it, then we start a different grift on something else. So this idea of masculinity and toxic masculinity is super unhealthy. It's gonna like run itself out, but by looking through history, it's going to run itself out in all the right-wing grifters that I just mentioned. But when we look at history, we know that this is a good grift. It will just shift to somewhere else, right? Like it continues on. We know that males don't seek support for this reason. Going to therapy and talking about their emotions is seen as weak. And men don't like to feel stupid. And a lot of men are emotionally unintelligent, right? So like, they're not socialized to be very emotionally intelligent. They don't see that modeled anywhere, and then they don't know how to do it. So then to go in and talk about their feelings is really hard. Like for a lot of the dudes that I work with, we start with just a basic feelings wheel, which is a diagram that shows what is this feeling you're feeling, and then add some nuance. There's levels in this wheel that show like, oh, you're angry. Like what's actually that about? Like, have you been harmed in some way? Is it an injustice that you're experiencing? Is something unfair? What is the anger actually from? So to build out some ability to tell what is the difference between these different emotions is where a lot of us start. And I'm a dude, right? Like, so I got the long hair. I have my whole career. The beard has not been there my whole career. But like, again, as a male, as a marriage therapist, a lot of people have picked me. A lot of dudes don't want to come into therapy and their wives want them to. And then here they are in therapy. And what therapist are they going to pick? They're going to pick the dude therapist because like, that seems less threatening. So, while I can say like all this masculinity is bullshit, I can also say like a lot of my career has been predicated on the fact that I'm a guy who does marriage therapy, which means a lot of dudes will pick working with me over other people because of just gender. And there's all this shame. There's all this stigma of asking for help, of being weak, of crying, of caring, even. It's so weird. It's so performative. And we see it, in the most recent election. We see young men have drifted far to the right. We see that a drive for like that authoritarian thing is all there, because they're unhappy, because boys and teens and young men growing up are feeling like something's against them, and the way that late stage capitalism has directed their anger is towards other marginalized communities as opposed to the capitalistic state. And like you can all be like, yo, Jared, what's this like socialist Marxist nonsense? Like you should look at what the difference between socialism and Marxism is, if you're using those words interchangeably. But also, like, right, like this is where we're at culturally. Like this is why men's mental health is in such dire straits, is because it's being manipulated into produce in the benefit of capitalism. So there's all this shame, right? And then men are don't have the skills and tools they need to process their emotions. They don't have the support system to talk about their emotions, and then they are shamed for having those feelings. And so at some point, like there's just despair. Like that's where these deaths of despair come in. That's why there are overdoses. That's why there are school shootings. That's why there are suicides, because these people are these young men are so bottled up. They don't have the skills and tools they need. They don't have support, and then they just have all these big feelings that they don't know what to do with. And then there's shame for asking for help. Like, don't go to therapy. Don't talk about your problems. In America, these problems are exacerbated by, even if you wanted to go seek help, our resources are incredibly limited. Access to mental health care is difficult in America. If you're going through insurance, it is a wait list oftentimes for people who will take your insurance, or you're seeing someone who is in training or doesn't have a lot of skills or experience yet. If your first foray into therapy isn't a good fit, you might just feel discouraged. Like, no one gets me. Look, I even tried therapy because that's what I saw online and it didn't work. So, like, right, it's just me. I'm just miserable. Life sucks. I read a bunch of Nietzsche, and so now I'm depressed. Nietzsche doesn't make people depressed. Nietzsche is often misunderstood, and his philosophy is one that you probably need some basic understanding of other philosophies to be able to pull apart and not just be a nihilist about things. I'm a big fan of optimistic nihilism, as long as we're on the topic. But separate topic. So finding mental health services is hard. Finding services for your physical well-being. Let's say you are like, you know what, I'm not doing like steroids, but I could lose some weight, or I could fuel my body more appropriately, or I could take care of myself better. I'm going to start some different coping. I'm going to start going to a gym. And so even if you're doing something healthy, these things have costs associated with them. They're expensive. To eat healthy is expensive. To have a workout regimen that you're doing is expensive. There's costs with fueling your body appropriately, with moving your body appropriately, and with getting support with that. And there's just a lack of male therapists. It's a female dominated, not dominated. It's one of the few professions where females outnumber males, and there's less male therapists than females. So the idea of a dude who's going to go find someone who specializes in men's issues is limited. Men's issues has also been coded for porn addiction, which isn't a thing. You can't get addicted to porn. You can use it in a not helpful way, certainly, and you can find porn that is not ethically made or sourced, and that can be problematic for a bunch of reasons. I'm not saying porn doesn't have any issues. I'm just saying, like, right, sex addiction, porn addiction, those are things that also are coming from this model of like, let's shame and blame instead of changing our system around it. So yeah, like men's issues is coded a little bit oddly within the therapy profession to usually mean like some sort of sexual issue, often porn use. But again, like it's not just that. It can be anger. It can be struggles with processing your emotions. I work with a lot of ND, neurodivergent adults, and along with that comes an inability sometimes to process or be able to differentiate emotions. It can come with some social stigma of not knowing other people's emotions or reading them well. So, there's nuance here that can make it more difficult to process and learn how to do better. And so we have lack of accessible resources. Going to the hospital is expensive. Going to your doctor to get a regular checkup can be expensive. Taking a trip in an ambulance is expensive in a way in other countries that it's not. In America, that those things can become pretty cost prohibitive, especially if you have lower socioeconomic status. There's bad diagnosis within therapy. Again, those mental health professionals who are trained in it are missing things. A lot of times men will have neurodivergence that's misdiagnosed. They will have eating disorders that are misdiagnosed. There's just like this gendered stuff, and females too. Again, like it's not just men who are suffering. Caveat to all of this, we're just talking about men right now. But there are some real unique issues where social norms around anger and rage could mask other things around rub some dirt on it, bro. Don't talk about your feelings, dude. Makes something like diagnosing ADHD or autism really difficult. So there's misdiagnosis even if we seek this out. And like it's not doom or gloom, it's just to say that like, yeah, these are real problems. And on a societal level, we have issues that we're not addressing. Any therapist who's working in the field will tell you like, right, there aren't enough of us, and there aren't enough of us who are trained in nuanced models to work with a specific population. And if we are, we're expensive because we have to pay our bills too. And it is a burnout system of taking advantage of the working class, right? So, we put these how many episodes of my podcast have been about that burnout cycle for young therapists who are put in these high intensity situations that we're not trained for and then burn out. So to find your space and to get into a field, a niche within the field where you can be helping a population and have actual expertise in working with that and special nuanced techniques that you're using, like takes years and years of therapy, working in the fields and doing your own training and learning your own stuff before you can be able to really do that effectively. There's again this performative nature to masculinity that comes with being successful and performative, and there are very few jobs that will pay to meet your basic needs. We don't have we have this idea of men as providers, which again is bullshit. It's not based on anything, but that message is sold out into the world, out to the men, the masculinity idea of you're a provider. And we don't have very many jobs that provide for a whole income, for a whole family, without another person having income. This is, again, late stage capitalism. Is like, you're not doing enough to provide for your family, and there are no jobs that pay that well. There are no houses that are that affordable. There are not new cars that are affordable. Like, again, in the 1950s, post-war prosperity in America, things were very affordable where families could afford to have a house with a 2-car garage and have a car in the garage, and mom staying at home, not working, and like affording her barbiturate habit. These were not good times financially and economically. Things were very affordable, and that social climbing was attainable to a lot of people, but there were still a lot of issues. So this financial pressure and this work pressure to produce, to be successful. And again, what I said earlier about like doctors, nurses, lawyers are also working stiffs because there's social climbing that comes with that. Like there's the cost of moving out to the suburbs. There's putting your kids in club sports that's really expensive. There are all these things that take that money. So even as you move up, you get a raise, you get a promotion, that money is getting sucked back into the system at large. It's not actually social climbing. You just have to keep working hard until you die. Fucking capitalism. So there's all this work and financial pressure. And again, that's all wrapped up in produce. How are we being productive members of society? Are we successful enough to be making progress? And we just, and then men will, unfortunately, after all these issues that make it hard for them to be successful, will often seek out poor solutions. We know that men are more likely to engage in risky behaviors, driving too fast, engaging in unsafe sex, engaging in illicit drug use. They're more likely to do things that put their safety at risk. The reason men are such a high percentage of the suicide statistics is because they are far more fatal in their suicide attempts than females. And so they're just picking riskier things. They're picking things that are more lethal and more risky. And so, they start drinking heavily because they can't do anything with their feelings. They don't know how to process them. They don't know how to talk about them. They don't have a support system at which to talk about them. So they're going to start drinking to numb it away. They're going to start using drugs to numb it away. And so, like, substance use as coping skills, their coping mechanisms are just poor ones. They're functional for a bit, but usually that functionality fades, especially as the use continues to go up and up and up. And to get the benefit of certain drugs, your usage almost always goes up, right? So they're only, yeah. So you build the tolerance, and that's where that then becomes problematic, is you're using to get the same result. And you don't feel better unless you're numbed away, right? And you don't really feel better, you just feel numb. And then when the substance wears off, you still feel shitty. So we know that men engage in these riskier behaviors. We know that engaging in these risky behaviors can lead to financial strain. Some of these drugs are not cheap. Wanting that fast car that you can race in could lead to spending a lot of money in that car, buying a lot of equipment, crashing that car, needing to start all over. We know that a lot of these things can lead to legal trouble, especially if you're not white. And that can set you back and create new stressors in your life, and also create new financial stress. So now you're paying for a lawyer, or you're going to jail, you have a felony on your record. All these things make getting that job and that social climbing harder. So now the performative masculinity cycle gets harder, because you have these consequences to taking these risky behaviors, because there wasn't this support network there to support you through your thing. And we know that risky behaviors and substance use, all these things have worse outcomes longitudinal. So when we study over time, these are not good outcomes. They get worse. The other thing is, I think men who are struggling seek help, often not from experts or professionals, but from online sources. And there's not good media representation. Again, like your Jordan Petersons, your Joe Rogans, Donald Trumps, Vince McMahon's, Dana White, like the masculinity grifters. Elon Musk, who has hair plugs and had a surgery to make his jaw look more defined. These guys who are performing masculinity at such a degree because they're so insecure. Donald Trump famously was hated by his father and ridiculed for how stupid he is, because he is generally very stupid. And so, like, it's all just this performative act. The talking heads on YouTube, on TikTok, it's just performative, and they're insecure. And it's that bully mentality of, like, if I point out other people's insecurity, then no one is going to point out mine. And so you're struggling, and you go online and you're looking for, how can I feel better about myself? And the first results are Jordan Peterson talks. The first things that pop up are some big, bulky, steroided out dude with a big beard who says, I got the key, go do your push-ups and your squats and take my creatine supplement. And it doesn't work, right? Like, working out helps some. We know that physical movement is tied really strong correlation to an improvement in mental health, but that doesn't treat mental health. That doesn't fix lack of support system, lack of secure attachment, lack of good role models. So you get the wrong advice, and then you go down it, and now you're in this grift where people are trying to make money off of you, who are trying to manipulate you into staying unwell enough that you keep giving them money. And so it's really hard to find good information. It's really hard to find good representation. Again, like, who are our male role models? The Rock, roided out dude with an unrealistic body. Like Leo DiCaprio, who dates a new 19-year-old every couple of years. And it's interesting. I think Kendrick Lamar is an interesting case, because he came out with this album that's basically an extended metaphor about going to therapy and seeking help. And everyone got mad about it. And his community was mad about calling out issues for men in the community and talking about sexual abuse that isn't dealt with. And, and then Kendrick goes and just roasts Drake for however many songs in a row. And it's like, dude's pedophile. And again, what's the performative masculinity there for the touched up hair and all the stuff with Drake, who's very performative in his masculinity and seems very insecure, and apparently is a predator, not a shock. He kissed a minor on stage and kept talking about her looks weirdly. And that like these people who get a lot of power, who gather a lot of money, that then they're using it to harm other people or abuse people. Andrew Tate is the name that I haven't mentioned yet. Another genuine idiot who's balding and is deeply insecure, and so he's to make everyone else feel bad about themselves because he doesn't want people making him feel bad anymore. Again, it's all this bully mentality. Like, don't look at my insecurities, look at yourself. And it's not supportive. It's not helpful. Um, yeah, I like genuinely, it's hard out there. I, it's weird to talk about men's issues, and I'm glad there's Men's Mental Health Month. I'm glad there are things like grow your facial hair and don't shave your mustache. And there are these ways to talk about men's healthcare, taking care of our physical health and getting your prostate checked when you're of a certain age, and all these things to normalize, like, hey, it's okay to take care of yourself. That's not weak. That's strength. It's good to look out for yourself. Um, I want to talk about where do we go? What do we do? So, for those of you who are seeing the video version, behind me is this big Lord of the Rings movie poster that I have in my basement where I'm recording. And like, Lord of the Rings is my continued go-to for positive representation of masculinity. Aragorn is a badass throughout the entire movie, and he is soft and tender with the hobbits. He kisses Boromir on the forehead. He greets Gimli and Legolas in these warm embraces. He's respectful to women. Um, and he feels feelings. He cries. He's sad. He gets mad without taking it out at people. Um, he's just sort of like this quintessential, like, there's a dude that no one's questioning his masculinity, whatever that means. He's got that box checked. And he's soft and tender and loving and shows his feelings. Samwise Gamgee, the hero of the story, uh, loves Frodo. And like, yeah, there's a lot of fanfic out there about them hooking up, and that was not Tolkien's intent, because they could just love each other. And Tolkien, as a war veteran, I think probably has this idea of like, when you're down in the trenches together, then like you take care of your brothers, and like that's what beautiful sentiment, right? And so, Sam is, I can't take the ring, but I can take you. And is there's some good worth fighting in the world? And like, as long as there's some good, it's still worth fighting for. He cries, he's overjoyed. The other hobbits are overjoyed when Frodo awakens in Rivendell. Everyone is weeping when Gandalf falls in Moria. Like, they all feel big feelings and are not scared to show their feelings. And because of the support they have, they're able to do that safely, and they get through these horrors together. And honestly, late stage capitalism is a horror. It's not great out there for most of us. And the way that we get through it is with our community. Like, take care of your bros, check in on your dudes, give each other a hug when you see each other. The bro hug, but then like, hands on the shoulders, give each other a little shake. I care about you. I'm concerned for you. How are you doing? To text each other and say, bro, I'm thinking about you. I hope you're doing well. Dude, man, my guy, I feel you. Those are all lovely sentiments, and I think we need to normalize some of that. I think the younger generations are a little bit better at not performing masculinity, but then we have some research that says, again, some of them are deeply lonely and are finding bad information and turning the wrong way. So we need to have community support. I think one of the things that needs to change sooner rather than later is community spaces. We just don't have a lot of space for people to support each other. That's true across the board, but specifically for men, like, you got to pay for your gym membership, and it is a high standard to get started at the gym. There's a lot of angst to get through. You're not a member of the community just because you walk in the door. There's time and effort to put in, and then once you're a regular, you're sort of accepted. Things are just expensive to do sports. There's a cost associated. You got to find your team and you got to join. And what if you're out of your playing days or out of shape for playing shape or whatever? It's you go and you play and you're not welcome. And so there's some high costs socially, and there's some high costs in that we just don't have things accessible to people who are in financial struggles. We don't have caring for children. We don't have supporting people. Everything is expensive all of the time. Our young men necessarily don't have food to eat and don't have the money to pay for school lunches because that's not a thing we supplement. And so, or they're geographically in food deserts, which is where you don't have access to clean, healthy, organic food at an affordable price. And so they're buying food out of the vending machine because they're starving, but they can't buy a healthy option. Or to go grocery shopping, they have to take the bus, and that can take hours to get to a grocery store round trip. Milwaukee right now, where I'm located, has a ton of construction. Like, I can't imagine trying to take the bus somewhere to get your basic necessities met. Like, there's time associated with that people of privilege, people of certain socioeconomic statuses just simply don't have to deal with. And so we don't have good community. We don't have spaces to meet that are free and or even just financially accessible, right? Like, there's always a cost associated with these things. Like, the library and your local parks are free, and like to organize around those things is possible, but also not a thing that's like readily accessible. Those things are happening just on a very small scale. And I only know that because I have kids, and so I go to the library. So like, I know what's going on at my local library. But like that, those lists of third spaces where people can meet and congregate and gather and have community, and they're accessible to different groups and different classes, are few and far between. Like, a listed libraries in nature would be great to have more of those things. And instead, people who have money are buying super yachts and raising taxes to pay for sports arenas that they have the money to pay for, and they don't, because they just care about making more money. So, ultimately, how do we fix men's mental health? Like, overthrow the system? And like, that sounds so wild. And I have been in the mental health field for 15 years. I think there are ways to focus on organized action in your local community and make your local geography better. And to do it system wide, we need a different system. Uh, Late stage capitalism is alienating for people and hurts people and makes people miserable on purpose, so that a few people can get wealthier. And so, yeah, we need collective action. I think what can you do on a daily basis is focus on your local community, build your local support group, find people in your area, go to nerdy game events, go to a park and walk around and exercise, spend time in nature, read a book out in public, listen, go to your local chess meetup, whatever, like play Pokemon, do your nerdy stuff, do your sporty stuff, be a jock, be a nerd, whatever. Like, know that there's no correct way to do masculinity, and then connect with your community who's also doing those things. And I think we just need more spaces of those that aren't built on toxic masculinity. Gym culture is built on toxic masculinity and the grift. And the other option, I think, is nerd culture. And there's a high cost socially for that, and a high introductory cost. Like, if you don't know how to play board games, or you're not, a strategic thinker, like some of that stuff, it can be a really high cost to break into some of those spaces. So again, I think we need more spaces. I think for those of us who come from privilege, we need to not only speak out on these issues, but we also need to use our privilege to force some spaces open to protect the marginalized communities, the people who have less than. Spider-Man is a lot of people's favorite superhero because Spider-Man's broke. He's trying to make ends meet. He's not Tony Stark or Batman, who have a bunch of money. That's why Spider-Man keeps working throughout the different iterations, because he is relatable as a working class stiff who is also trying to do good. With great power comes great responsibility. So those of us who have privilege need to be opening spaces, need to be pushing for more spaces, need to be advocating, and not joining in on the grift, and certainly not, stepping on other people's necks on our way up one tiny rung of a ladder that we're never going to get to the top of. Like, there is no more social climbing. The door is closed in our current system. And so we just need to be doing it differently. Be kind to people. Jesus, like, the toxicity online, like, and then people, there's the grift on that. There's the grift on all of that. It's fucking depressing. And, I think there's hope. I think, again, society goes through shifts and changes. It's usually revolutionary at this level. Like, there is no way to get out of late stage capitalism that preserves capitalism. And so we need a more egalitarian society. We need something that cares. And on micro level, you can do that in your local community. On a macro level, it will take probably concerted effort to overthrow the current system. And that system serves a lot of wealthy people. And late stage capitalism continues to concentrate that wealth and power. And so the news media is corrupt. The government is corrupt. All the branches of the executive, the congressional, and the judiciary are all corrupt. Like, these are not Citizens United is 15 years old. Like, we made corruption legal. It was going to keep getting worse. We've recently had and are soon to once again have the wealthiest cabinet of all time. There's not regular people leading the people. It is wealthy people getting wealthier, flaunting all social norms. We have a convicted felon who was just elected president. People like Vince McMahon, rich and powerful men who are abusers and predatory, continue to not see consequences. So, yeah, some overthrows probably necessary, and then support our people because we're hurting. People are hurting, men are hurting, and we need to have local space. We need to have local community. We need to have in real life local community to be able to make progress in these things. So it's great to have awareness around something like men's mental health, and now we need concerted effort on action on a societal level. So, not all doom and gloom, but reality that it's not great out there. So, next week, I'll be back interviewing people, talking to other mental health professionals about how they're taking care of themselves, working on building my local community, working on investing in the community of helpers so that there's availability and the ability to help each other. So back next week with another new episode. If you have ideas for certain topics, if you have professionals who are well known in those topics, want me to interview, please contact me. Let me know. If you're somebody who wants to talk about something, contact me. You can follow and like and subscribe to the podcast. That's super helpful. I'm also on YouTube, Wellness with Jer. Got a merch store. So all that stuff's in the show notes. All that support. If you want to keep doing this stuff, any way that you can support, like and subscribe is free. Share the podcast, leave a review. All that stuff helps because the algorithm is part of late stage capitalism too. We're all participating in the game that we didn't sign up for. Hooray! All right, everybody, take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. See you next week. Peace.